Today we are learning basketball with Es Baraheni, co-host of NBA Daily. Find him at Raptors Republic and Sportscasting NBA, covering the Toronto Raptors and the NBA every day for you. And also on Twitter, you gotta check out his Twitter. It's always a fun feed with highlights and fun reactions, great analysis. Appreciate you hopping on today, as there's a lot to talk about here. But before we dive in, how you doing today?
Yes, sir. No, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for having me on as always. Always good to chat hoops with you. Yeah, excited to get to talking about the Raptors, who are probably doing better than we both thought. But yeah, let's rock, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we first started playing in the pod, we're excited about this Raptors breakout season. And since then, Trae Young's been traded to the Wizards, and now Ja Morant's back into trade rumors as well. And his name's been floated around Toronto as well. And the Raptors keep on chugging, just doing their thing. So there's a lot to talk about today. I thought before we dive into the Raptors, I really wanted to hear your Trae Young thoughts and just in general, instant reaction to the trade. Only seeing C.J. McCollum, Corey Kispert, and no picks change hands either way. I'm not sure, who like which team probably thinks they should have got picks in that ordeal. But I'll dive into my thoughts in a second. But I want to know, what was your instant reaction?
Yeah, I was pretty shocked of the value, just because I thought even in this climate, a guy like Trae should be able to secure anything other than expiring salary. But I guess his value is so low that the Wizards capitalized in a major way. And I think from the Wizards' perspective, this is such a low cost move for you because you were going to let CJ McCollum walk anyways, and Corey Kispert is like a solid role player, but not. I would probably say not first round value. And so typically you would see Trae maybe get moved for something more than that. Now you have this sort of window of maybe a year and a half to see how Trae fits in with your organization, how he gels with those young guys, and see if you want to extend him moving forward from there. It's a low cost move that makes sense. From the Hawks' perspective, I understand moving on to, they're kind of shifting into a new direction with Jalen Johnson at the helm of things. And I'm curious what they do with their newfound flexibility when it comes to those expiring salaries. Obviously, they have that luxurious Pelicans pick that they can deal with as well. So a lot of moving parts for the Hawks, but I think they clearly are just kind of like shifting into a new direction with Jalen Johnson, which I'm very curious to see how they end up building around him, because I still think you need a ball handler next to Jalen Johnson, another guy who can create off the bounce for you, because I don't necessarily think like Jalen Johnson has been incredible, all-star. I don't necessarily know if he can be the number one shot creator for a very, very good team. I think he's like very talented. He's obviously clearly most improved or much improved, but I have questions about whether he can be the number one shot creator / ball handler on a team. You probably need another guy there next to him. That guy's not Trae, but it could be somebody else, so.
Yeah, that was one of my thoughts, was just the idea that have they seen enough in, say, Nickeil Alexander-Walker as something of a combo guard? Do they want to surround Jalen Johnson with combo guards like Nickeil and Dyson Daniels, where, they incredible two-way guards that can play connector and, do little things for your team. But, clearly Jalen Johnson's kind of the priority in the pecking order with the ball in his hands and asked to create. And, that's definitely the big question is, how does he handle that number one load as the number one guy? And, statistically, he's getting it done absolutely across the board. And like you said, like how does it hold up for a winning team, for a playoff team trying to win games? We'll see. I mean, they've been competitive, kind of without Trae, it seems like this season. So they're already in the play-in range, with and without him. So we'll see. I mean, it seems like play-in level good, but, could it be contender level good? That's a good question. And right. I think I was most surprised by the value, just like the idea of a Trae Young for Luka draft day trade. And now, they're essentially both salary dumped, or just dumped in general, however you want to look at it. And just kind of unfathomable looking back for how strong that class was, that, those are the two that aren't on the teams that drafted them anymore. But, Trae, like you said with the Wizards, almost a no-brainer. Like you can add up all the reasons that, it seems like Trae Young's value has plummeted around the league. There's rumors of however he is in the locker room. Maybe he wants to play a certain way. He's obviously great talent-wise. Like to me, he's a one-man offense. Like I've probably been quiet in the Trae Young corner. It feels like where I still see this guy as like an all-star level talent wherever he plays. Like putting up, he's not James Harden, but you can trust this guy to run a high volume of pick and rolls, scoring consistently, creating a good look for your team, hitting tough floaters and mid-range shots, and like every play would be a threat to kind of run the offense, hit the three, create a good look. So the idea that, that level of talent didn't work out, something's going on, right? And it's probably something off the court that we don't know about, or just kind of, personalities clash. And sometimes after a while, like experiments don't work, even if they work on paper. So, I think it's a fresh start for him in Washington. It seems like one of the few matches where they're also like primed to kind of use up that salary anyway. Like maybe teams are a little afraid of the salary, whereas Washington's like star hunting for that salary to pair with all their young guys. So, that's an interesting mix. They now have a creator for all of their play finishers, kind of like, Atlanta might now need, but, like you said, might need a different guy. And CJ McCollum gives them kind of a scorer short term that's, veteran, knows how to be there. And Kispert's a knockdown shooter, but just not, the level of talent you would think. Like neither of those I don't view as a blue chip kind of prospect franchise guy that they're going to build around going forward. But to Kispert's credit, a very, very, very good shooter in a lot of different ways. So like they will be able to utilize that talent in the rotation, I'm sure. And maybe even as, a starter or 6-man long-term for this team, we'll see. But still, just a lot to take in for Hawks fans, I think, for that era to be over. Do you think this kind of resets? Where do you think they are now? Like, is this one step back for 2 steps forward down the line?
Yeah, I think so.
Which is the same thing I said with the Dyson Daniels trade too. Like, just don't, but we're slowly getting back in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where they clearly know there's a long-term goal in mind, and they're not being short-sighted. I appreciate when front offices do that, knowing that they don't necessarily have any sort of chance to contend or compete. And so they're not being short-sighted. I'm maybe this is a bit of a segue into our potential Ja Morant conversation and whether the Raptors should get involved here. But I think that would be a relatively short-sighted move for them to go out and get Ja if I'm the Raptors. And truthfully, that's why, I think from the Hawks' perspective, they decided to move on from Trae Young, is knowing that they've reached the limits with this current group. And you got to move on and you got to figure something else out. There's also just so many options. Like, hey, if they end up with Darren Peterson and now you have, if they have Darren Peterson and Jalen Johnson next year, and now you're like, okay, now the Hawks have a real chance in the coming years to contend, to compete. So that's where I'm at with what the Hawks are trying to do. And Onsi Sala, kind of like Canadian bias here, but I think he's doing a pretty good job. So, yeah.
Yeah, and, to that point, this is one of the most loaded draft classes, but also guard draft classes in my recent memory, which is going down the list. So if the Hawks, I know that this basically not only maintains flexibility, but really increases their flexibility with some of the salary and not being tied down. Obviously you would have liked to get a few more picks to go with your flexibility, basically, by getting off the Trae Young deal. But, it's not the most they could have gotten for him basically any other time in his career, it feels like, kind of thing. But at a certain point, the time was the time. But I do think they have a roster of two-way talent and play finishers ready to go if they do find kind of that other star creator. And to Jalen's credit, like, he has essentially been that this year. And he's, all NBA, all-star level type guy. He's on that realm to me. Like, he was one of the most dynamic, versatile, like, defensive guys coming up, and now he's also showing that versatility offensively when he gets more usage and maintaining efficiency. I mean, 24 points, 10 boards, 8 assists, 4 turnovers.
That's absurd. Yeah.
1.8 steals and blocks, and shooting lights out from everywhere. Like, just insane. for him as well.
Yeah.
So definitely want to see what they do. I could see them. I do agree. I think they go long-term rebuild here with maybe moving on from Porzingis as well and keeping some of these young defensive prospects, two-way guys around Jalen Johnson. And they have all these picks and flexibility now where maybe they bring in some young talent. And like you just mentioned, I mean, Peterson or like two of these young rookies or lottery talents would be huge for this group to just kind of reload on the fly, because they could be a play-in team already and have some young, really big-time talent coming in next season. And same with Washington. I think they're going to be really fun. I really like what Washington has been doing on the margins, just making good decisions, and now they have a handful of young talent that, Kalaboli and Alex Sarr, Trae Johnson are all like top blue chip level prospects in my opinion. And they're bringing their own complementary skill set, and now they have like a veteran all-star point guard. And maybe it's one more kind of lull year for them and one more big draft rookie this summer, and then they get going next year. Like both these teams could be playing, looking up, going forward at like next season, as soon as next season, I think, even if it's a little bit of a hurdle this year.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Let me ask you a question. How do you feel about Ja? How do you feel about where he's at right now? And like his, because I think these things are sort of related when we talk about Trae.
Yeah.
And like his value and where he went for, and Ja, and what he might end up going for. Like what do you think of his value right now in the league?
For sure. I think this trade definitely will be used by someone as an example in a negotiation for his trade value, and it won't be in his favor kind of thing. Like it will be like, this is what Trae Young just went for. A very similar resume and type of talent and, polarizing, let's say, star around the league. He got a veteran player and a prospect. I was going to run some fake trades with you. We can jump into that with Toronto in a second here, just because we're on the topic. One of the basic ideas was if they're not going to get any picks either way too, like it might just be salary matching. And like the one that stood out to me, and I imagine to you too, is Immanuel Quickley and pick a prospect. It could be Agbaji and Grady or Jacoby Walter, any one of those three, in just a straight up trade. Or maybe it's Garrett Temple, more of a veteran throw in, and you throw in one of the maybe younger or cheaper guys on the salary books, like I don't know if they would move Alijah Martin or Mogby, or Jamal Sheed. They feel like guys, but there's all these guys feel like Raptor guys. So I don't know. Is there like one guy that like stands out that you think, I think they would be most likely to attach one of these names with an Immanuel Quickley, let's say, to try to get a job.
Yeah, I mean, Ochai is the obvious matching salary here for them, just because he's also an unrestricted free agent this summer, and so I think he moves. They move Ochai regardless, just because they have so many guys in that position, in that slot of like off-ball 2-guard type of guy, that I think they want to give some opportunity to Jamison Battle. They want to give more opportunity to Jacoby Walter and Elijah Martin, like you said. So I don't see Ochai Agbaji being a part of the long-term future for the Raptors. So I would probably say Quick and Ochai are the two that they would package together, and that gets you to Ja Morant's salary. Now, after that, you're probably thinking about who else you can add to this. I would basically hang up the phone on any conversation around Collin Murray-Boyles.
Right.
It's not happening. It's not possible. I'm not
sorry,
trading.
Sorry, Grizzlies fans. I don't like. I saw a couple of those tweets. I'm like, maybe 2 years ago, Ja would have been that was like a blue chip young prospect for Morant. Anytime before all of this drama, I guess. Only so much of it is him that we know of, but a lot of it's the kind of the way he's covered too, I think. And
it's also health and availability. And ultimately, I think that's where I'm just out. And so like the The prospect I would probably include, I mean, I would probably throw in like a Jonathan Mobo in there, like you said, a lower salary player. But if they want one of the first round picks from the Toronto Raptors, whether it's Jacoby or Grady Dick or Colin Murray-Boyles, of that bunch, I would probably pick Grady Dick. I think he's really struggled this year to solidify himself as a shooter in the NBA. He's had inconsistent stretches as a shooter, and really just hasn't been able to put it together. And so I think if there was one guy to include in that type of trade, it'd probably be Grady. Yeah, that's sort of where I'm at with things if they had to go out and get him. Now, truthfully, to be honest with you, around the whole Ja conversation, I don't think the Raptors should do it at all. You know, I'm of the opinion that even though Immanuel Quickley obviously has not panned out the way that they have wanted it to, and his contract is not the greatest either. He has, I believe, 4 years left and $32 million. Like that's not a great contract. I still think what he provides as a pull-up shooter is incredibly necessary for the Raptors offensively. And when you bring in Ja Morant, who is an inconsistent three-point shooter, almost like he's like I don't know, he doesn't even take threes in any sort of high volume. He also doesn't get to the rim as often as he did. I was looking this up yesterday, but his rim frequency has gone down every single season of his career. Now you can talk about context and you can talk about where he is as a player and how the Grizzlies are kind of throwing him into things. I don't necessarily I think part of that is also the injury stuff with him and how healthy he's looked or unhealthy he's looked in the times that he's played. I was also looking this up. You might be surprised at this. I was shocked when I looked this up. So Ja Morant is averaging 15 drives per game this season. Immanuel Quickley is averaging 10 drives per game this season. So obviously Ja Morant, more frequent driver of the basketball. But IQ is shooting a better percentage on drives than Ja Morant is.
Oh,
and that's less about IQ. That's less about IQ and more about Ja Morant and where he's at this point in his career. A guy who, if you kind of take the general fan, casual fan perspective, should be a monster at attacking the basket. But he has not been that. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at with Ja, man. I'm completely out on the Raptors trading for him because I think he's a terrible fit for what they want from that position. You know, I would have been more interested in Trae just because of the potential of playmaking and pull-up three-point shooting that does facilitate some of the things they need from that position, however inconsistent it is. I would be more into the idea of them trading for LaMelo Ball, however injury-prone he is, because of the pull-up shooting and playmaking ability he provides at that position. Ja, to me, feels like a square peg round hole. So, yeah.
Man, I don't think NBA fans necessarily would have thought that about some of the numbers with the driving, the finishing, and even the three-point shooting. Like just a quick scan at his box scores, like he was 33% three-point shooter his first 3 years, and he's gone down to about a 30% three-point shooter 3 years since, and then down to 20% this year from three. Yeah. This is his worst year statistically, like since his second year in the league. Almost across the board, it looks like, especially efficiency-wise. And, what's funny is, to his credit, I don't want to kill Ja the whole pot. He still has some of that star talent. Like, just the other day, there was I think it was against the Sixers, where, like, Ja Morant single-handedly kept the Grizzlies in this game against the Sixers.
It was a great game. It was his best game in a while.
And maybe it was the national TV of it all. Maybe it was putting on a display of what he can do. What's funny is he wasn't hitting the three; he was hitting the midi pull up. That one, just nonstop, getting to his spots, and showed his electric scoring that way. But to your point, I think the question seems like, is the trade-off in talent and whatever headache is involved here? Is it that much different between Quickley and Morant at this point, between everything they bring to the table? Is it worth throwing in extra stuff, too, on top of Quickley, if you're already having that conversation? And beyond that, disrupting the solid chemistry they seem to have right now to bring in something of a disgruntled talent who may or may not want to be there and has all these other things. Like, You know,
I've
I yeah.
I totally agree. I've heard someone, I can't remember who it was. Someone made a Vince Carter comp for Ja Morant.
Mm.
And I mean, you're well versed in the Vince Carter world. And so like I remember in Toronto, obviously he got traded to the Nets, and a lot of the same conversations were, hey, he's quitting on the team. He's not the same player he was. He's not as athletic as he was. He's injury prone, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of the narrative stuff about Vince changed completely when he went to New Jersey, and he was this. He went back to all-star status almost immediately. That's the only pitch I would have for you for Ja Morant to be traded. Is there is something different about getting traded out of a place that has become this toxic environment for you. And maybe that's enough to jolt him back into all-star and all-NBA status. And that's sort of the pitch you have to make to yourself, or the belief you have to have in a player like that to go out and trade for him. Otherwise, tough sell.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You mentioned Vince, so it gives me an excuse to show you every shot Vince took in the NBA while we're here. Whipped this up the other day. You know, shout out to Vince. Mm-hmm. You know, just a fun date of his. Every shot he ever took, all the red dots are makes, all the purples are misses. A little hard to see for my fellow colorblind folks, but it's the Raptors, you know, team colors out here. You know, we had to make it pop. So, you know, shout out Vince, legend. Magic legend, Raptors legend, Nets legend. But right. I actually agree with that. That, like, you know, it's his worst year by such a far margin that it feels a little bit more like internal than like he suddenly just, you know, is a lot worse at basketball. Like I don't know if he's dealing with any sort of injury stuff or anything like that, but you know, it feels like it's just kind of everything around him right now that's affecting it as much as anything. So I am with you in that degree. Like, you know, he was, you know, a two-time All-Star at 22 and 23 years old and still has a lot of that speed and quick first step burst and handle dynamic game to himself that, you know, like we just saw with Jimmy Butler going from the Heat to the Warriors. Like these guys just need one reason to prove somebody wrong and suddenly be their best self again and most motivated self again. So I do agree there. Like, you know, you throw, let's say, Ja Morant on the Bucks next to Giannis, and these two guys are like really trying to prove everybody wrong. There's a one more example where maybe there's a match in talent there where maybe you get a little bit of a LeBron, Kyrie, my turn, your turn, downhill driving type of effect there where it works for two guys as dynamic as them. But, you know, they're not necessarily in the same place as their career, but just one spot that comes to mind, I guess, for Ja. I think he could still be that dynamic guy somewhere. I do agree with that general take. Like he should be having another 3, 4 years, 5 years of his athletic prime, really, before, you know, we see a decline for that reason. So, you know, any other spots that you like Ja Morant other than maybe the Bucks or the Raptors or something?
Yeah, the Bucks are interesting. Just because of the desperation play there, truthfully, and you get the talent in the door, and to your point about gambling on him being able to rekindle or rediscover what he had before, that's sort of an interesting destination. It's obviously a star-level name to try and attract Giannis Antetokounmpo to staying a little bit longer. So I could see the Bucks taking a swing at him in a major way. I also am curious about like Minnesota and where they're at with their point guard situation. I don't feel like Ja and Ant is a perfect fit, and they're at a position where they can kind of be a little bit more picky with the type of player that they go after. So I'm sure they're going to knock on the door of like Kobe White and see what's available, and maybe another whatever point guard is available. Maybe they'll wait until the summer, and if the Cavs decide to blow it up, they'll go after Darius Garland. You know, there's multiple avenues for the Timberwolves to try and do something, but that they're obviously in need of a point guard of the future, so they naturally should be in this conversation. I've seen the Miami thing be brought up with Ja, and I guess from like an outside perspective, I guess it makes sense. But when you consider that they have the same assistant coach
Right.
that Ja was not happy with last year, that feels like a hard sell. Unless they just completely deviate from that style,
Yeah.
which I doubt, which I don't think they will do. So
Right. And to
yeah,
your point,
that's where I'm at.
like there was this whole thing that Ja did not want to run like a screenless offense, and that's kind of what the Memphis Grizzlies ran for half of the year with one of their assistant coaches, Noah LaRoche, and now he's a part of the Miami Heat staff, and helped them have a very incredible offense this year, taking that concept, and it was working as the league's best offense to start the year, and then has whittled down to about league average or above average, but still very competitive level using those concepts. So that is an interesting dynamic of, Morant seems to fit some of the Heat culture stuff and fit the roster, but that is a clear like question mark. But it's a coach and a player. If they're cool and bygones be bygones in the locker room, I'm sure they can figure out what works for them if all is good there. I think just after this whole conversation, I just want to throw him on the Bucks and hope for the best and give Giannis as many shots as staying in Milwaukee and being happy and contending forever. Basically, is where I'm at, I guess. If we got to move him, because to the Grizzlies fans' credit, I don't really think the Grizzlies fans want Ja going anywhere. Even through all of this, like I think they still want him there from everything it sounds like. But that shows a little bit to what he means to Memphis and why the trade is so hard to me, because it's a classic. Like he means more to Memphis than he does to every other team. So you really have to take almost nothing and take a hit with the fans to make this happen. And it's a clear like white flag where either Jaren's cool going through a rebuild or he's next out the door, and you're just now you have a whole new team around the young guys, which are promising, Cedric Coward and Edie and Jalen Wells, but two stars in their prime, you don't necessarily want to just punt on and restart if you can keep one or keep one happy, rebuild around Jaren maybe or keep it going there. So that'll be interesting, but I think it is a major, obviously, like moment, just like an inflection point for it, as it was for Atlanta with Trae, as you're saying. So interesting to see these kind of small guards, not totally heliocentric, but kind of in that realm of like high volume guards that need the ball in their hands a lot, kind of go from peak value to a little lower value if they're score first and not kind of team first, I think is where it comes to. Like if you can dribble, pass, and shoot and you're making the best play for the team, that's a little better than just looking to get a bucket every time down and not really looking to play, share the ball.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I'm curious about where the Grizz head to, because it does feel like with them nailing the Cedric Coward pick, they feel more comfortable doing something like this because they see all-star, potentially all-NBA potential with a guy like Coward. And so they probably feel a little bit more comfortable moving off of Ja, knowing that there's some sort of infrastructure there outside of them. They still haven't even had Ty Jerome play a basketball game for them. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or I believe Scottie Pippen Jr. And so like they do have talent at the point guard position. I didn't even mention Cam Spencer, who's like a decent player. They have talent at the point guard position outside of Ja to be okay without him, and still compete and still revolve around Jaren Jackson Jr. And maybe they do tank out this year and say, hey, we're just going to try to get another high quality pick into the door and see how we can build around him. It's sort of like the Hawks situation, which is very interesting because I think there's three teams right now between Charlotte with LaMelo, obviously Atlanta with Trae, which we saw what happened, and then Memphis with Ja. They're at these inflection points with the fact that they've either found a new cornerstone or drafted a new cornerstone, right, and they now feel comfortable switching directions. It's a very interesting thought to think of, like what happens next with those guys. But
yeah, that's the NBA. Life comes at you fast, and your replacement can be drafted overnight without even realizing it. With I think we hit on the enough of the Ja trades there. I am interested to see where it goes, and I do agree with you after kind of the way you put it there that from a team building perspective, moving on from Ja, and you still have Jaren and Cedric as two cornerstones. If you can keep Jaren happy, that he's a true like unicorn type big to me, proven both ways on the ball, can similar to what Jalen's doing, but like proven defensive anchor, proven offensive all-star option, can be a number one scorer, but like some of these guys tend to be even at the Anthony Davis level, like even there, I think they tend to be better as like a number two play finisher, even if they're the leading scorer on a lot of nights and a defensive anchor. They're still just kind of better as play finishers, finishing the play when paired with a creator, a point guard, a half court maestro of some sort. Rondo to AD back then, and I think that is the goal. So I do agree that if they could get, especially a pick in this draft, to go with all their prospects, and if keep Jaren happy and Cedric happy, and you have Edie and Wells, like those are four like starter level building blocks to me, with two potential stars, like you said. Coward could be all defensive type guy too, like on top of all that potential. So that is some real stuff to build around for Memphis going forward. But on Toronto, it's time we shift over to the main event, halfway through the pod, really. I mean, we're 30 minutes in. That's some good trade talk for the viewers here that are here with us. The Raptors, though, are the surprise of the season, and really the reason I wanted to talk to you today more than anything was just shouting out these Toronto Raptors, the surprise kind of the season, that at least a little bit of surprise to me, maybe not in Toronto, that this front court is just working. Like things are just gelling. It is smoother than at first anticipated. Scottie Barnes, Colin Murray-Boyles, Brandon Ingram are just, working together. And first and foremost, that's my first question. What's working with that trio?
Man, well, specifically with the duo of Colin Murray-Boyles and Scottie Barnes, the Raptors have been dominant defensively. I think their defensive rating in the minutes those two play together is 100 points per 100 possessions, which would be better than OKC's mark right now. Like, they are absolutely dominating teams on defense when those two guys play together. And Colin has fit in like a glove defensively. I think he's been just like a perfect switch everything type of big. He's been able to body down low. Like, he's very, very strong. And so he's been able to play up in position and size a little bit. He's also been a very talented rebounder over the last month. Per 100 possessions, probably the best rebounder in his rookie class. That's the type of guy that they've added to this roster. Now, I don't know if long-term they want him to be their starting center. I would be surprised if that's the case, just because he is undersized. And we saw how a player like Joel Embiid could take advantage of that on Monday when they played each other. I think ultimately he's just a very useful defensive tool. And if his shot creation or if his three-point shooting, which has been surprisingly good this season, he's like, I think last I checked, he was at like 37 or 38% on pretty low volume. But the fact that he's at that percentage when he was a non-shooter in college is a very, very good sign for this Raptors team moving forward. It works also because I think offensively they have switched to Scottie Barnes being more of an off-ball scorer for them. So he's running more screens than he ever has in his career. He's being run as a pick and roll pick and roll roll man more frequently than he ever has in his career. He's just gotten to a point where he is very, very comfortable working off of the ball within the crevices of the offense. And because he's such a talented playmaker in 4-on-3 situations, he's able to make so many different reads, and you're seeing what Scottie is able to do in an open floor. At the same time, their defensive identity has helped them force turnovers and get out and running and be this very good transition team, at least in terms of frequency. So that's why things are working. They started out the year as the number one offense in the NBA. I think in November they were the number one offense in the NBA. That has completely evaporated. They're 19th on offense. And part of that is like they don't have anybody who pressures the rim in any sort of way outside of RJ Barrett. And they still lack in the three-point shooting department. So that's sort of the two equalizers there aren't there, but they dominate in the mid-range area. And they do a really good job of like honing in on the skills that their roster has to get the most out of that team. So yeah, that's where they're at, man. Raptors are punching above weight for sure. And part of that is just because I think Darko Rajakovic is a very good coach. He's figured out how to get the most out of a team that is still trying to figure out its identity for the most part.
And I love the bit that he does already. I think he took it from Pop, where anytime the opposing scorer goes off for like 38 points, it's like, hey, we held him to under 39. You know, job
he
well
does
done.
that often. Yeah, he does. Yeah.
It's funny. I've
even
caught
when
him a few times.
I think Austin Reeves went for 44 against them, and he's like, yeah, we wanted to limit him to 45 points. Yeah.
It's a great bit. It's a great bit. You know, power to him. But I'm glad you mentioned, you know, two things stand out looking at these stats. And I'm going to read you, I don't even know how many stats here, but they are forcing turnovers and scoring off them. They are number 1 team in fast break points, top 5 in forcing turnovers, top 5 in assists, top 10 in steals, top 10 in scoring points off turnovers, points in the paint, and then defense, defending points off turnovers and defending points in the paint. So, you know, they are forcing turnovers, scoring off of them, driving downhill, fast breaks. It's Scottie Barnes and Collin Murray-Boyles' bread and butter, and especially in transition, being able to do that. And then, you know, like you said, I think the shooting for CMB hitting already is huge, because that was probably my main concern, was the perimeter shooting between him and Scottie on the floor at the same time, because it feels like they're both kind of meant to be in similar places of the floor in as these like point forwardy power forwards, but they're both just so skilled and cerebral on defense, and kind of pass friendly, connective passing on offense, and if not full on point forwards, that they can just play together, and especially if there's enough shooting to go around with that. And you know, how does Brandon Ingram's kind of tough shot making kind of alleviate some of that? Is that part of it, where those three playing together, where, you know, his spacing and shot making is helping kind of make it a little more possible to play CMB at the 5?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And they rely heavily on BI to be this sort of release valve for them offensively when things don't shake out. So a lot of like grenade type of actions where it's like, hey, there's 6 seconds left on the clock, we need you to get a shot, and BI gets it done. I don't necessarily love that as the offensive process, truthfully. But to your point, yeah, that's what's allowed them to maybe play a little bit smaller than usual. And honestly, Scottie's defensive prowess has allowed them to play smaller too, just because he plugs so many gaps that it just ends up being this thing where he can cover so many opportunities for the defense. And yeah, he's great.
What stands out is definitely Scottie Barnes, Collin Murray-Boyles' defensive instincts. Some stats on their defense so far. Scottie is tied for 23rd in deflections, 40th in steals. He leads the team with 1.9 EPM, I think, at the moment, just above RJ Barrett and Immanuel Quickley, who are both at 1.8 EPM. Scottie does it mostly with defense, but he brings the two-way impact. Barrett and Quickley are doing it offensively, and you know, to your point about Ja before, like, you know, they're kind of getting what they need out of that role. Like maybe Morant, like it gives them a more explosive, dynamic score, like ceiling, I think, probably on his best nights. But you know, they're getting that consistent production. I do want to hear a little bit about Barrett and Quickley in a second, but just while we're on CMB, he's actually leading the team on the defensive EPM side via dunks and threes, 1.3, just by a margin, in the 89th percentile, and tied for 43rd in deflections in his own right. The defense as a whole, 7th on defense for the Raptors. They're 4th in forcing turnovers, 11th in forcing tough shots with shooting efficiency, 14th at defensive rebounding. And the 15th overall offense is held up, playing safe with the ball, with the low 5th overall in turnover percentage, and 10th crashing the offensive glass. So, you know, playmaking, forcing turnovers, smart decisions with the ball really stand out. But, you know, what is it about Quickley and Barrett that has worked well with this front court, you know, as scorers, or maybe it's staggering a little bit, different lineups between these 5 or 6 players now that we've mentioned? What has worked for these two this year especially?
Yeah, again, I think it's they run this very egalitarian offense where on any given night it could be any of those guys that drops 20. And I think that provides a level of unpredictability to where the offense is going. Now, truthfully, in clutch situations that does change and the priorities end up shifting to Brandon Ingram, and him being the guy to be the be all and end all in clutch situations. And so truthfully, I think they need to change that. But overall, uh, throughout the game, there's a level of unpredictability to how they get about on offense. And RJ Barrett can get downhill. His rim pressure creates a lot of good looks for the Raptors. They usually get teams in rotation because of RJ's downhill gravity. And then Immanuel Quickley is very good at attacking closeouts and working off of basically attacking a tilted defense. He has not had a good shooting year, but when he is shooting the ball well, he's obviously very potent as a catch and shoot player and a pull up shooter. So his ability in the pick and roll. He's probably been hurt the most from Jakob Poeltl not being healthy this season, just because he desperately needs a guy to set good screens for him in the pick and roll to be able to create opportunities for himself as a scorer. I think that's limited his ability to be as good as possible on the offensive end. But overall, his shooting is very important to this team. He's also kind of like a tertiary creator for them in a pinch when Scottie and BI aren't on the floor. So there's just a level of unpredictability to their offense that provides them a baseline of what they've been able to do. But truthfully, their offense isn't that good. Like they're 19th on offense for a reason. I think most of that is because they've had some injuries here to RJ and Jakob, and that's limited their ability to be as good as they possibly can on the offensive end. They've leaned more on their wing trio to be their offensive engine in Collin Murray-Boyles and Scottie Barnes and Brandon Ingram. And I think that's more than enough to get by. But they've really, when this team is locking in defensively, is when it's been able to win games. Very similar to, I think like the Miami Heat this year have been a very good defensive team, but their offense has kind of fallen off a cliff. And I think part of that is because they also have this unpredictability to their offense. And when you don't have like this one star player that can go out and get you, high usage, high efficiency buckets like a Tyrese Maxey or like a Jaylen Brown or something along the lines of that, you just don't know where your consistent source of offense is going to be on any given night. So as an example, on Sunday versus the Sixers, Scottie Barnes ends up going off for 30 points on 10 shots, and he got to the free throw line a bunch, only made 1 3, and somehow ended up on 30 points. When you have that type of Scottie Barnes, you're going to do pretty well offensively. But the very next night, Scottie struggles, and it's like he still hasn't gotten to the point where he is like a consistent scoring threat. He's more of an all-around player. He's obviously a very talented defender and passer, so that's where he provides his like efficiency on any given night. But overall, it's like you don't know where your scoring is going to come from. So their unpredictability actually breeds unpredictability for how good their offense will be on any given night.
Yeah, I mean that adds up. I think for a lot of reasons, just guys having to invent something every time versus having something to rely on in the half court, whether it's an action or a player. I think does matter over time, but I do think it's interesting to think about like what is a more or a better way to create advantages for your team consistently. Like, is it like I've long thought like a general pick and roll offense can, if you can run it well, can create a pretty good look more times than not. Can you just run ISO and screenless offense to create those types of advantages without a star ISO player to do it? Can you do it with any personnel? Does it matter on the personnel? Like, I think those are all interesting questions. And, I don't, it's not like I know more than them. I think it's just, I'm sure they're going through the different hypotheticals themselves on the best ways to create advantages for their team to score. And, that is probably the simplest way, I think. And like it, to me, it reminds me of playing pickup basketball. I think ISO and pickup is very similar in that sense. It's just, just playing hard and kind of outplaying the other guys, but it relies on a lot of self-creation and kind of I don't know, maybe ingenuity that you have to think a little harder to create something every single time differently than if you already have a kind of a set like system that this is what we're running every night. This is where I need to be. This is when I need to be there and when I need to time up the shot in the pass. It's just interesting, I think, in a general, where the line is between like the system and the talent that you have and how to mesh those two things to get the most out of it. And if there's just one way that's the best way to create advantages for any team, or, does it depend on the team? And I think it depends, but they're trying to see if maybe it doesn't. Maybe we could just run this type of offense and it'll turn around as the season goes. I mean, we'll see, especially if they do make a deal or anything. But more on Scottie and Collin Murray-Boyles. Do you think they are both at the point where they're officially franchise players, untouchable? Has CMB already reached that point? I think Scottie has been that. Is CMB officially there? Like, has he already kind of shown enough to you?
I think depending on the player that they're going out and getting. For CMB, I wouldn't trade CMB for Ja Morant. Wouldn't include him in any sort of deal for Trae Young before that. Wouldn't have included him for LaMelo Ball. But if you start getting in the conversation for like the Giannis's of the world, those caliber of players, then of course those guys become trade eligible, if you will. I think with Scottie, it's a bit of a different story, just because I think Scottie, man, I'm really looking forward to the day where the Raptors get a star guard, because when they get a star guard, Scottie will be able to play so well off of that guy. Of course, like the ideal type of player that I would think of is like, imagine if Scottie Barnes could play off of like, I don't know, Devin Booker or Anthony Edwards or something along the lines of that. Like a high volume scoring guard who can get to his own, but also can create a little bit in a pinch. And I think Scottie would just work tremendously well off of those players. Ultimately, how do you get to that is the question that the Raptors will have to answer as they try to build out their roster. But I think that's where you come into the question of like, is Collin Murray-Boyles a guy you can eventually trade and move, or is he a guy that's a building block for you? To me, I think it just depends on the caliber of player that's available. I would say no when it comes to the Jaws and LaMelos and Trays of the world. But if you're going out and trying to get like a top 10 player, then yes, of course. Yeah.
There it is. Yeah. I mean, I think I agree with most. I think all of that, especially it depends on the player, of course. But, CMB is getting pretty close to me for the, I guess, untouchable status, I guess I would say, where he's just, but Scottie has been for a while, too. And I know you've been high on Scottie. I bet we did the redraft for that class. I think it was before the summer. If we did it now, he might go a little higher. Maybe it was a down time for Scottie and a high time for Mobley.
Yeah.
It's kind of been flipped now. You'd be just as well taking Scottie. 2 or 3 in that one.
We did a redraft for the 2021 class for the NBA Daily, I think like a month ago, and I picked Scottie second. There was a lot of consternation about that. Well, there was some issues taken from Rockets fans because they believe Şengün should have been second, and then from Cavs fans who obviously thought Mobley should have been second. I think all three of those guys have pretty decent cases to be second, but
I'll throw Franz in the mix too. But
sure,
I hear you.
Yeah,
and
why not?
When we did it, I think it was Scottie, Mobley, Franz. Cade, Mobley, Franz, Scottie, Şengün, I think was the 5 for us. But
we ended up going Cade, Scottie, Mobley, Şengün, Franz. I think that's where we are.
And I mean, some recency bias can always be at play with these things, and it's interesting because I really don't think you get the answer until like 5 years out after you know all of the everything plays out, all the situations, all the teams and roles and everything like that. You really don't know the true answer. But when a guy like Scottie can go off and be a defensive anchor, like you say, like super dynamic on both ends, just disruptive one-man defense. You pair him with CMB. Those are two like all defense level guys in the same front court with cerebral feel that you can just build a defense around and build your whole team around going forward. And you have all these scores now, dynamic scores around that fit well, and that kind of breeds success for at least like an elite defense that gets out and runs and has some ISO downhill guys to rely on when push comes to shove. And, ideally you want a perfect basketball team, so you want to work on some spacing and work on more explosive scoring and find the answer on the other end. But you can see those two just kind of being a tag team duo for Toronto, fitting that exact kind of defensive feel, that archetype that they love going forward. Because just that Sunday that we're watching now, Scottie Barnes 31 points, 64% true shooting. Collin Murray-Boyles 17 points, 64% true shooting. 3 blocks and 3 steals for CMB, the rookie. Scottie did it on 9 of 15 twos, drawing a bunch of free throws. CMB had some great defensive feel as a prospect, great footwork as a prospect, as a downhill driver, and connective playmaking. And the shooting was a little bit of a question mark, and I thought the archetype fit overlapped a little too much with Scottie. So I'm been proven wrong on the fit side of things, and I'm glad, because it's one of the most dynamic defenses to watch out here in the league, and could definitely see an explosive guard being paired with these guys, really taking them to another talent. Now, do you want them to make a trade for one this season? Like, if that was, obviously if you can get Booker or Ant, but do you is there a realistic, right? Is there a realistic trade like this season other than Morant that you could really get an upgrade for Quickley?
I would see what it would take to go out and get LaMelo.
Yeah, that's the one. You're right. That's the one. I'm a huge LaMelo fan for what he brings. Obviously, there's some erratic decision making in his play style, but dude's electric. Yeah. Just an electric shooter, connector. Like, pairing that handoff, pull up shooting with Scottie and that no look playmaking. Just a natural. Because I think what you're getting at, is that, like, we've talked about kind of the Giannis comp before with Scottie. But even with both these guys, just because they can doesn't mean they have to. Like, you don't have to run point forward Scottie every play. He can also be an incredible decision maker as a short roller, where he's like maximized as this big, brooding, rolling power forward already with moving downhill with a little bit of an advantage, and then he can make a decision on the fly. Like, he can, the Raptors can take advantage of his playmaking field just as much in that rolling way, I think, as they can as the creator, to your point of finding that perfect fit as a guard to go with him, could elevate his game to another level. Because I do think, like I've said it before, like he's the closest guy, I think, to Giannis in the league in that sense of who could be the next Giannis. And we're still, I don't think there's any reason to back off that. Like, he's a destructive two-way downhill force. Maybe he'll never be quite as big as Giannis in a certain aspect, but he's a special player, two-way force, an all-NBA type of superstar any team would like. And, we've been saying that every time we pod about him. So, like, I don't think that's changing anytime soon. Who is the most underrated player of this whole group? Maybe someone we haven't even talked about much yet. Maybe it is just the unsung hero of this specific season, where the Raptors were not supposed to be here. They're tied for 9th best record, 10th best point differential, 24-17. They're competitive on both ends and all these stats. Who's the guy that, doesn't get enough love in the national media, maybe?
Probably Sandro Mamukelashvili. Minimum signing. Mamu has been awesome. He's been their kind of like their backup 5/4. Yeah, Mamu,
I was trying to think of the nickname. Mamu. There it is.
He's been very dynamite for them. A little inconsistent recently, but a very great start to the season for him, where he's just been this very good stretch 5 option who really enhances what they do offensively. He works really well next to Jamal Shed as this sort of pick and pop option for him. With Shed's gravity and downhill ability and Mamu being able to pop out to the basket, they make a pretty interesting dynamic in the pick and roll. And Mamu is very good in transition. He's one of the best spot-up players in the NBA and has been. In San Antonio, he was, by the numbers, one of the most efficient spot-up players as well. So he's absolutely the guy, I think, who's been the unsung hero here for the Raptors. Yeah, in general, whenever the Raptors have been at their best is when their bench has been awesome. So it's the combination of Shed, Mamu, Jacoby, Grady, and those guys who have very big nights. And when those guys have big nights, the Raptors usually end up comfortably winning.
And do you think a playmaking center is the right is the ideal fit next to a Scottie Barnes and let's say a Colin Murray-Boyles long term? Like if that's your 3 and 4, I think is where you would rather play them, but they could also just as easily play 4 and 5 because of the defense. But there's some small ball deficiencies that you trade off. You're gonna lose the Embiid post-up matchup, but you win some mobility and versatility for switching and whatnot.
Yeah.
Who's the ideal like third front court partner? Is it a big? Is it another wing? Like what kind of player do you think would best kind of fit with them in the front court?
Yeah, I was actually, someone asked me this yesterday for my own Q&A thing that I did. It's like what's the ideal front court player? It's either your stretch 5 rim protector wiry type of guy, which by the way,
we forgot about the Mo Bamba emergency trade pod. Here we are. We finally got to it. That was the answer. That was what happened. It came and went. The cup of coffee. Man.
Yeah, unfortunate for Mo Bamba, he didn't get that much of an opportunity.
Man.
But yeah, like I guess hypothetically what Mo Bamba provides makes sense. You know, those type of players don't grow on trees. They really don't. Like there's probably 5, maybe 6 players in the NBA who can do what I just described in any sort of way. It's Victor Wembanyama, it's Chet Holmgren, it's Brook Lopez, it's Miles Turner, if you want to talk about him as that type of player. And
that's it. Like Kristaps when he's healthy.
Yeah, Kristaps Porzingis when he's
Wendell
healthy.
is sneakily up there. Not as much on the blocks, but he is a stretch 5 who's a versatile defender center. So shout out Wendell here. You know.
Yeah, no, totally. And like that's just, we listed 6 guys. You know.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. It's hard to find those type of players, but I think that's the ideal version of the type of player that you need next to those guys. But the other way they could go, and I could see them going, is just like the hyper athletic lob, big vertical threat that could be, provide them with vertical spacing and defensive pop. So I'm thinking like Derek Lively. You know, obviously Anthony Davis is an elite option here if Anthony Davis were young and healthy, whatever. But like that type of player could make a lot of sense for this Raptors team too if they're building it out. It's just a different way to build. You would probably need, if you want to get that version, you need to have a very good point guard. You need to have a very, very good pick and roll playmaker. And so, how do you find that? Because Jakob isn't that. Jakob is neither of those things that I just described, right? That's more of the passing hub, playmaking hub. Hey, we're working with cutters, etc. type of big. So you're thinking of the Sabonis, right? You're thinking of, I don't know, Hartenstein, who's a good rim protector in his own right. But that's a different version of big man that I think the Raptors probably will eventually move away from.
Yeah. It's hard to find the unicorns. They're unicorns for a reason to actually hit one. I mean, Mo Bamba got his chance. I do wish it was a little longer, but man, I'm rooting for him. I want him to stick, but it's getting tough. We're on. I've lost count. I think it's like 7 teams in 5 years. Where he's bounced around a little bit, but one guy that has broken into the rotation that you've been fond of, it looks like Alijah Martin from UF. You like what you've seen from him, and what have you seen from him that you like going forward that you think he'll kind of stick in the rotation?
Yeah, he's sick.
He was undrafted on a 2-way deal, or he was
drafted. Okay. I think he was like a late second round pick, 45th or something like that.
Okay, I saw a 2-way deal. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, he's on a 2-way. Okay. He's been awesome for the 905, who have only lost 1 game this season. Yeah, the 905 have been awesome.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Isn't there something in like how they use their team where like maybe they're trying to compete a little more than everybody else, or what's going on there?
I mean, they just have a lot of like good G League level talent when it comes
Mm.
to like AJ Lawson, Chucky Hepburn, who's unfortunately out for 6 weeks. They have Olivier Sarr. They have Jonathan Mobo. So they just have like very good G League talent, and Martin fits in very, very well because he's like this. They don't change much from what they do with the 905 offensively compared to what they do with the Raptors. A lot of the same playbook, a lot of the same actions, a lot of the same defensive and offensive philosophies. And so a lot of the things that they do are replicatable, if that's a word. They can replicate.
Replicable?
Replicable, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're replicable in what they can do in the NBA. And so Alijah Martin, I just think he's like there are I think 5 or 6 shooting guards on this roster right now between Grady Dick, Kobe Walter, Jamison Battle, AJ Lawson, Ochai Agbaji, and Alijah Martin. They have to decide eventually which one of those guys they want to keep long term and which one they want to invest in long term. I think Alijah will be one of those guys. I trust in what he brings defensively at the point of attack. He's a little small, and I also trust in his 3-point shooting ability and just general athleticism. So, fun player. Hopefully, he gets more run here as the Raptors sift through their roster and maybe make some trades at the deadline.
Yeah, and obviously some championship experience. Big time athlete, kind of like I saw him as like a D3 guard in college. I don't a 2-way type guy, but I don't know. I don't think the 3 is hit yet, but at least showing that defense, that athleticism. Yeah. And to your point, like I, if I'm not mistaken, I think Toronto seems to use their G League a little more like a JV team for actual like.
For
it's
sure.
a great in theory to do this, and you see like teams send 1 guy or 2 guys down for experience for big volume, but I don't know if they have like the depth of talent like you're describing with this many guys maybe going back and forth from the main team to the G League team, and getting that experience in a system that is the same exact system they're going to be running with probably some of the same like 3rd or 4th teamers getting that experience and chemistry together, and then moving up the ranks a little bit there. The Raptors do own their draft pick this year, right? So they'll probably be low 20s or low mid teens, low 20s, depending on how things shake out. I was going there. I don't know if there's too many unicorn centers in that range. Chris Cenac Jr., if he falls, is kind of a guy that brings some rebounding instincts and a nice jump shot and shot blocking instincts. He's has had a little bit disappointing start to the year for Houston, but he was on the Team USA big top 100 camp, big time talent. One big man that comes to mind, and I don't know why, but 2 guards in the lottery for me, Abuka Okori at the moment and LeBaron Philon stand out as like Raptors guys. Like if they were just gonna,
I like LeBaron. I like him a lot.
Yeah, he's just a winning player, a long, strong guard that is out here to defend, make you work, make smart decisions with the ball. Abuka Okori too, right. I would describe him similarly in that way, just very cerebral 2-way talents, and just feel like Raptors kind of guys, especially for a front court that is now so loaded. If you can find a prospect to take a swing on, why not? And it's such a guard-heavy draft. I mean, you could definitely find a dynamic guard to take a swing on in that range. Like I really love the guards in this class, so there's plenty there to look at. Was there any names that we have not hit on that deserve a shout? I think we got through most of them, but anything else on Darko or any names here that Jamal Sheed or Jacoby Walter are part of the rotation here, just to give some guys a shout that might not be getting enough love?
No, not really, to be honest with you. No, I think we've hit on the main characters here.
Cool.
And yeah, ultimately it's just like this team, they're now heading in a stretch where their schedule gets a little bit more difficult. So they've clung on to the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. Can they remain the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference as they head into the trade deadline? Because they have the next 3 or 4 weeks are really tough for them. I'm very curious to see how they end up doing that. But yeah, appreciate you, dog. That's all I got on the Raptors front.
There it is. They're and to your point to end it there, they're the 4 seed in the East, 2 games back of the 2 seed, but the 9 seed Hawks are only 4 games back of them. The Heat, 8 seed, 3 games back of them. The Magic have one of the easiest schedules coming up the rest of the way, along with their stars coming back. Sixers are getting healthy and right. You know, but the Raptors are right there and have been all season. I think they're going to maintain that top 6, top 7. You know, if it maybe they end up a higher play-in team, worst comes to worst kind of thing, but like they have earned that like top 6 type of playoff seed so far this year. If the playoffs ended today, obviously, but just with that energy. My last question and thought: should they do anything? Should they just ride out this roster and see what they can do and get that playoff experience that, you know, I think Scottie's probably ready to feel a little bit more of around now?
Oh, yeah. I think that they will make a trade just because they are above the tax, so they're going to try to get out of the tax. I think they will try to create some roster balance. I just mentioned that they have 400 shooting guards. They probably will consolidate one of those shooting guards to go out and get a backup center. The Jakob Poeltl situation is concerning just because he has not been healthy this season, and he's obviously their starting center. And without him, they legitimately don't have another 7-footer on the roster. Like the next tallest guy is Scottie Barnes, and he's like 6'7", maybe 6'8" on a good day. So yeah, that's an issue for them overall. Actually, Mamu is the tallest guy on the team. He's 6'9". I lied. Anyways, so that's where they're at. I think they will try to trade for a backup big man that can play some spot starting minutes for them depending on matchups. Who that big man is, I have no idea. Could it be Goga Bitadze from your Orlando Magic, who I'm a big fan of, by the way? I think that would be something I would be heavily interested in. I know Mo Wagner had just came back, so you guys have a lust of backup big men. Anyways, so Goga is one of those options for me that I look at, but like there's a lot of big man names out there in the market that they can go after. So we'll see.
Yeah, but Bitadze just had something of a breakout game. His first start of the season, balled out, still brings that defensive impact and playmaking, and could definitely be a rotation center and fill a backup role.
It feels like every time he gets an opportunity, like he kind of takes it and puts up good numbers, and I don't know. It just every single time, it doesn't matter.
It feels like he is something of like the spot starter for Orlando. So like they don't even like it. They won't really use him as a backup if they don't have to. They only use him. They try to use him with the starters to replace specifically Wendell's role. But Mo Wagner has been out all year, so that hasn't really been the case. He's been paired a lot with Jonathan Isaac, with a lot of like not great spacing backcourts or backup benches options. So you're left with a little too much Goga on the bench. You get over there?
Yeah.
The hot take.
No.
Get you?
No, I didn't realize my mom came in and brought my dog.
What up, dog?
So I had no idea this scared the crap out of me.
Man, I thought it was just the Goga take scaring you, but that was close. At least the doggo's all right. I was randomly thinking, too, maybe the Raptors get in on, you mentioned Porzingis and Miles Turner. Maybe there's like a 3-way trade with Ja Morant where he ends up in Atlanta and Porzingis is out of there. Or maybe Miles Turner has to be thrown into a salary and he's salary dumped to make it happen. Maybe they can scoop up him. We're trying. And Anthony Davis' name is out there and available, but I don't know if they really, that one would probably cost CMB, I would think. But that would be tough to get them without. But, you know, they could do something, but the Raptors are here. Just got to, at the very least, shout out Toronto for having a fun surprise season. They weren't expected to be here, and now I think they'd be pretty happy, winning a playoff series and getting some experience that way, and they deserve it. They're a fun team, so appreciate you, taking the time to talk to the Raptors, share your knowledge and insight, and talking hoops today.
Yes, appreciate you. And you just got like the clip of a century of me being scared shitless. I just turn around and I see a figure come to. I was so scared. That was funny.
I love it.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate
we'll see how it looks. Hopefully it times up perfectly with some hot take about Goga. That's what we need. But I appreciate it, man. That was fun. That was a fun one.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.